My name is Paul Elliott, and I work for HashRocket. We're a Rails consultancy in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. My job there is as a consultant and programmer. I used to work in the enterprise doing Java web development, and I worked on teams that are actually not that much different from the teams that I work on now. Always interfacing with business stakeholders, non-technical people. I never really considered myself a consultant, though, until it was part of my official capacity, like when I started working at HashRocket. And thinking back, if I had realized back when I was at big product shops that I really am a consultant, that it's a big part of my job, all of my interactions would have gone better, my projects would have gone better, and I would have had better relationships with the business people there. Now, when most people hear the word consultant, they think of these guys. These are, of course, the Bobs from Office Space. And I know when I told my mother-in-law that I got this job at HashRocket and I was going to be a consultant, she's like, so you guys go into big companies and do what exactly? It's not really what it is. And these guys, this is a joke, of course, but they really exist. One of the shops I worked at hired these process consultants. They came in and had this real dog and pony show that they put on. Interviewed a lot of people to get a handle on exactly how we were working because they were going to redefine our processes and make us more efficient. They do this for a few months, then they go away, figure out what our new process is going to be, come back, and they're like, prepare to be amazed. We've developed this brand new state-of-the-art software development process for you. We've also developed some custom software that's going to facilitate it, and we're going to sell that to you too. How it's going to work is the product team is going to come up with some business requirements, and they're going to hand that to the system analysts. The system analysts are going to make technical requirements. They're going to give those to the QA team and the developers. QA team's going to make the Selenium scripts. Developers are going to do all the codes. They're going to put that in staging. They're going to test it. The QA team will test it, and then it'll go to production. This is totally different from what you've been doing because it's going to happen in 6 months instead of 2 years. Isn't this amazing? And, I heard this, and I thought of this. What they've basically done is given us this nice sandwich package of their software. They've added a bored Tom Selleck to kind of distract us from the fact that that's the same waterfall that we had before. These guys, they're not consultants at all. They didn't advise us. They didn't add any value to our process. And I would venture to say they put the con in consulting. I'd really like to break this stereotype, because what a consultant really is anyone who provides expert advice professionally. That's a very broad definition. That can mean a lot of things. Certainly it includes every single one of us, because we're experts on something, presumably something technical, maybe web development with Rails or some other sort of web development. But this extends to a lot more than just us. I mean, think about you go into a coffee shop and, I drink Americanos, which is just espresso and water. Say it's fall and it's October, and I'm from Florida, so it's like 90 degrees, humid, and the leaves are all green. But I still want to get into the fall mood. So I ask him, I'm like, look, I drink Americanos, but I want something festive. So he said, what does he say to me? He says, well, you need a pumpkin spice latte, right? Because that's festive. I'm like, yes, I do. He just consulted me, right? He helped me make that decision with very little information. I gave him some vague requirements, and he made a decision on my behalf and set me on the right path. That's not unlike what we do, right? This guy's a consultant. He doesn't think he is. He doesn't think about that, but he certainly is. Think about when you bring your car into the shop. It's been 10,000 miles since your last oil change. It's running a little rough. So you bring it in, and this guy comes back with this big grin, and he's holding this thing, and he says, your vaporizing pressure knuckle is not properly calibrated with your commuter valve, and that's causing your flux capacitor to only run at 2 gigajoules, and that's why your car's running rough. Your headlight fluid's a little low too, and this is going to be causing problems pretty soon. So you're like, that sounds made up. I don't even know what you're talking about. As the stakeholder, he's the subject matter expert on the car. I'm the stakeholder. All I care about is driving the car. I don't really even know what he said. So he gave me too much information, but consulted me nonetheless. And think about when you get into a cab. You go to some foreign city. A few days ago, I landed in Denver. I've never been to Colorado before. I get into a cab, and I'm like, I need to go to the Boulderado. He's like, okay. So we start going. And he asked me, he's like, do you want to take the toll road or the other highway? And I'm like, well, is there a time difference? He's like, no. I'm like, okay, so you're asking me if I want to pay an extra $9 for this cab ride in tolls. Is that really the question? Do I just want to pay extra money for no reason? That's what's going through my head. So, I asked him, like, there's no time difference. Why didn't you just make that decision for me, right? You could just tell me, because you're the subject matter expert on this. You know the roads, you know the traffic, you know the construction, time of day. You know that I don't want to spend an extra $9 on the cab ride. The cab driver's a consultant, right? He doesn't think about it that way, but he certainly is. Now, in our field, we're a very opinionated bunch. I love this tweet. We're all subject matter experts, right? We tend to be very passionate about things. It's our job to reason these big, complex ideas and break them into something that's manageable that we can work with. And we tend to think we're experts on everything all the time. I had a potential customer come in, and she wanted to build a software system that would allow people to make reservations at restaurants like tonight, but not just make them, but buy them. So they'll pay $50, $100, $200 just to get a reservation to eat at a fancy restaurant tonight. And my first thought was, that's insane. Who would do that? I mean, I have 3 kids and I live out in the sticks, so I go to like diners and stuff. I can't tell you the last time I made a reservation at a restaurant. But my first thought is, well, that's a crazy idea. Who would do that? But as a consultant, right, I need to be able to think about the person who would be able to do that. In my shoes, that doesn't make any sense, but there is somebody who wears a different pair of shoes than me, and that person's gonna want to maybe do that. So what do? I ask her some targeted questions about her business plan and what she's doing, right? So I say, is this happening already today? Are people already paying for this? And she said that, people are slipping money under the table to the hosts. They may or may not actually get a table for that. And so I'm like, okay, so aren't the hosts gonna be mad that they're being cut out of this deal? She's like, yeah, but the restaurant owners don't care. I've already talked to a bunch of them, and they don't care about cutting the hosts out, because now they get this money and they can guarantee tables to their customers if they want to pay for them. So, by beginning my relationship with her and asking targeted questions and showing her that I'm genuinely interested in this product she's building, even though I'm not ever going to wear this shoe, I'm never going to pay $200 for a reservation at a restaurant, ever. I would not do that. Other people would, and there's a very real market of people that would. So asking her those targeted questions helps to build trust and confidence in us early on in the process. One of the things you want to do as a consultant is own the role of the expert, and you do that, I believe, through honest counsel. Your customers, they start out trusting you because they hired you. They agreed to pay you in exchange for your services, right? They wouldn't have done that if they didn't think you could deliver. So it's up to you to manage that relationship and build that trust, build that confidence in you. Know when to hold them, and know when to fold them. How many times do you have to push back on your stakeholders because they're asking you for something crazy? They come to you and they're like, I had this great idea. If, when the user does this thing in my application, the keyboard would just levitate, and then they could type on it, it'd be amazing. And you have to push back, right? Because that's not gonna work. Because if somebody starts typing on a keyboard that's levitating, it's gonna sort of go out underneath their fingers and they won't be able to press the keys. That's not gonna work. I had a customer, for real though, they have this really complex system where they build these JavaScript files and put them up on S3, and then they get included in their customers' websites, kind of like the Google Analytics embed code. And they came to me one day and they're like, we need to be able to FTP these to customer servers as well. And I'm like, whoa, let's not FTP ever. Because I don't know if you've worked with NetFTP or the FTP protocol in general, but it's pretty brittle. There's a lot of opportunity to set it up wrong, set up the FTP server wrong, and I really felt that it was not gonna be in the best interest of their customers. I really pushed back on this, and he made it very clear to me that they're working with these enterprise clients. These are the kind of people that use tables for their layouts, and they're not going to budge on this. They don't trust the cloud. They don't trust S3. They're afraid Amazon's going to be down when their app's still up and it's not going to work. So we're going to have to do this. We're going to have to figure this out. So it was very clear to me that it was time to fold them. There's no reason to keep pushing the issue. I've worked with a lot of people that don't know when to stop pushing the issue, when to stop pushing back, and that really, really hurts that relationship. It's good to push back when you think that they're doing something wrong. Don't just accept whatever they're telling you to do, because often the business stakeholders don't really know what the proper solution is. They'll come to you and they have this problem, they've already formulated a solution, and they're going to tell you to do that, when in fact that's not necessarily the best thing to do. In this case, I kind of had to do it, so I implement the thing. But it's not over. They come back to me later and they're like, we have one enterprise customer who needs to be able to whitelist the incoming IP address so it'll get through their firewall, and it's got to be active FTP. And I'm like, that's great. Hey, instead, why don't we just do SFTP? Because that's way more secure and a lot less expensive for us to implement. He's like, that's a great idea. We should totally do that. He goes and asks them. While he's doing that, as a former enterprise developer myself and someone who used to use tables for layouts, I had a feeling they were going to shoot that down. So I figured out what exactly we were going to need to do for this other solution with the whitelisting and static IPs. So he comes back and he's like, look, this client can't spell SFTP. And they're not going to change their ways just for us, so we're going to have to do this. But let's examine that interaction, right? We built some trust and confidence there, because he came to me with this solution. I presented an alternate because I could see what they ultimately wanted. They didn't want necessarily to whitelist and whatnot. They wanted security, and SFTP is a much cleaner solution for that. Now, of course, so what my customer sees is that I'm looking out for the best interests of him and his client. And that's building that trust and confidence. That's owning the role of the expert. Scope creep happens all the time. We had a project where this woman, the stakeholder, she was a startup founder, new to the whole thing, but she was doing the right thing of telling everybody all the time about her project, right? Whenever she encountered anybody, she was telling them, oh my God, you gotta check out this app I'm building. So as a result, she would come back to us all the time and be like, look, I was talking to so-and-so and they said I need these new features, and I know they don't have anything to do with the MVP, but we gotta put them in there. And we started telling her no, right? No, you can't keep doing this. You gotta focus on the MVP. We're agile and we can add more features, but you're really taking us away from the things we need to build. We kept telling her no. She kept coming to us with these things. And we found that she eventually stopped coming to us with this stuff. She also stopped coming to stand-up. She stopped accepting stories. And she pretty much kind of checked out and stopped engaging with us. She had unlimited pockets, so she didn't really matter to her all that much. But we realized that we soiled the relationship with the client by constantly being negative with her and telling her no. And when we realized this, we decided to just start telling her yes. She comes to us with these new features, and we say, you know what, yes. So she comes to us one day after she starts talking to us again, and she says, and I kid you not, she had just pitched her app to Bob Dylan, and Bob Dylan had some great ideas for new features for her site. And so we're like, yes, we totally want to hear what Bob Dylan thinks about your application. I'm sure he's an expert on software development. But in the meantime, let's just finish our stand-up and let the development team go. The way we work is we typically have a pair of developers, a designer, and project manager / business analyst. So the project manager writes the stories. He stuck around, listened to her, go on about the things that Bob Dylan wanted, and he put some placeholders in and explained to her that she can add these features and these are nice to haves, but if you prioritize those now, it's going to push back things that we're working on, the things you actually need. And just the act of us starting to listen to those things and put in the placeholders, just saying yes instead of no to her, totally opened her up. She was on time for stand-ups again. She was accepting stories again. And it totally changed the relationship. The way you frame your words, too, is very important. People tend to be very negative. I don't know if you've ever read comments on Hacker News, but people like to run their mouths and say mean things all the time. And sometimes we even talk that way about our own work. We had a team that was working on this one project. They spent an entire day implementing something, and they got it to work, but they hated the code. You know, this happens. So they were going to rewrite it the next day. So they get on stand-up. They have a morning stand-up, and they tell the client, yesterday, we got the thing to work, but the code's horrible. It's awful. Really sucks, and we're going to throw it away, and we're going to redo it today. So the client looks like this. And she's like, who did I hire? What? Is this the second string? Why did they write horrible code to begin with? Why am I being comped for that? It works. Why are they throwing it away? They framed what they did poorly, and they were not honest about the work they did, in my opinion. They could have phrased it completely differently. You know, we always try to educate our clients on the software development process, red, green, refactor. They always say they understand, but unless they're technical, they usually don't. Even if they say they do, they usually don't. Our guys could have phrased it a little bit differently. Maybe said, you know, we spent the day yesterday exploring a bunch of different options, and we've settled on one that's really good, and we're going to spend the morning today finishing it up. That's the exact same thing, and to be perfectly honest, that's a much more honest way of discussing the regular development process we go through all the time. We also are big fans of what we call the unified front. The unified front means that we don't get into discussions in front of the client. We don't argue with each other in front of the client. We always take those things offline. When you argue in front of the client, it starts to kind of break down their trust in you because you don't come across as a cohesive team. And typically, those conversations are not for them anyway. There's not a whole lot that your business stakeholder can contribute. So there's no reason to have this conversation in front of them. We always take them offline. What we do is before every meeting, we get together, or any stand-up or anything like that, we get together internally, and we always ask each other all the questions we're going to ask to the client to make sure that they haven't already been answered. One of the things that makes you really come across as a confident and competent professional and team is not asking them the same question twice. If you always just ask once, understand it, and go, even if somebody else asked it and you understand it, then that goes a long way to building that trust, building that rapport. You guys heard of Goldilocks? It's a fairy tale. So Goldilocks wanted the porridge that was not too hot and not too cold. She, the people you interface with all the time are the same way. They want information that's just right, not too hot, not too cold. They always work within a certain context, whether it's a designer, a project manager, or your non-technical stakeholder. There's something they care about, some context they're always working inside of. Like your project manager cares about the project plan, most likely. What % complete are you? Your designer, cares about the user interface and how that interface interacts with the back end. Your stakeholder, business stakeholder, probably only cares about when they're going to get the stuff and maybe a little bit about the interaction. I had a situation a while back when MongoDB was awesome, and we wanted to use MongoDB on a project. And I'm totally geeking out because it's this cool new toy at the time. And so I get on the call with the client, and I spend about 10 minutes going on about document databases versus relational database, how cool it's going to be, and it's perfect for the data, and yada, yada. And at the end, he's like, okay, so where's it hosted? How much does it cost? Do I get daily backups? Yeah? Okay, great. Whatever you want. Like, okay. What I did there is very dangerous because he's a non-technical stakeholder, and best case, he's going to zone out while I'm going on my monologue. And then I'm just going to waste 10 minutes of his time and mine. Worst case, he's going to feel maybe a little small, maybe like he should have understood these things, and that's why I'm telling him to him, but it's a little over his head because I was going into very technical things. In the back of my mind, I knew that he didn't care about that, but I was just so excited that I couldn't help myself but going on the monologue. These days, I always like to give as little information as possible, and not because I don't want them to know what's going on, but because I want to make sure that they get the information they care about, and we can keep meetings as short as possible. When I come to them with only the little bit that really concerns them, then they remember that I'm not the guy that wastes all of their time. I know I've worked with a lot of people over the years that do go into way too much detail all the time, and it just overwhelms the client. You guys ever seen Kitchen Nightmares? Chef Ramsay goes into these failing diners or failing restaurants and tells them all the things they're doing wrong. It's very entertaining. There's a lot of profanity and crying and yelling. One of the things he always slams people on is having a menu that has too much stuff on it. Because most of this stuff is terrible. Like, you don't want to order a lot of the things on this menu because you can't do that many things well. I've been in a lot of situations where there's a decision point to be made in the application. We've got maybe 4 different routes that we can take. They're all similar, but there's different nuances to them all. And maybe 2 of them are terrible, and I'm going to be ashamed of doing them. One of them is okay, and one of them is clearly the best, and I'll be proud of the work. I used to think that if I didn't present all of these options to my stakeholder, that I wasn't being honest with them. But in truth, if I come to them with a menu like this, I'm not being honest to the project, right? Because if I'm going to own the role of the expert, then I'm going to come to them with just the best solution. I'm going to lead with that. Because I probably maybe still need to get their buy-in on it. I go, we're going to implement this way. Is that okay? Almost all of the time, that's okay. If you present them with this, they will always choose the wrong thing. Always. Without fail. So don't even give them the opportunity. Don't set them up for failure. If you're always the one coming to them with solutions, then they're going to remember that. Many years ago, we were trying to get to the moon. NASA figured out pretty quick when they got into space that pens don't work. They require gravity. So what do? They focused on that problem. Like, we've got to build a pen that's going to work in space. Because if we don't, how are we going to write things? So they spend millions of dollars to develop this, and I don't know if you've ever written with one, but it's really small and awkward. But it'll work upside down in space. It's really cool. Because they focused on the problem instead of taking a step back and figuring out what they actually needed to do. Now, the Russian space program, they used a pencil because lead works pretty much anywhere. Doesn't require gravity. One of the things I always ask my clients is, what are you ultimately trying to accomplish? Because they always come to me with, a not great solution, and they think they figured it out. But we're the subject matter experts on technology, and we can often figure out the thing that they really wanted to do. I had one client who they only work with big enterprise customers, so it's very white glove service. They've got dedicated personnel for each client, right? And they don't have that many clients. So they come to me and they're like, we need this super complex payment processing system for our handful of clients. And it needs to be able to do this crazy prorating stuff, and they add and remove features and whatever. And I was like, why do you need this? What are we ultimately trying to do here? And after really prodding them about it, I found out that the problem is not that they wanted to automate the payment solutions, but that they wanted to take credit cards, just be able to accept credit cards from their customers, because then they get away from the net 90 invoice stuff that they were having to deal with. So I proposed a different solution for them, where we basically let the customer just come in and put in their credit card information. And then their dedicated representative could just go and willy-nilly charge them. And I cleared that with a payment processor. That's actually cool to do. They can just type in the amount. First of every month, they only have one client. First of every month, they owe this much. Need to prorate, they owe this much. Super simple solution. We implemented it in a few days. It was the pencil. They asked for this thing because they didn't realize that all they needed was a pencil. So I save them a ton of money because time is money, right? And every time you do that, you're building that trust, you're building that rapport with them. And the more they trust you, the more they have confidence in you, the more they're going to be able to accept things like that. Presenting the right context. As I said, different stakeholders care about different things. And they understand things in different contexts. That one client where we used MongoDB, we got to a situation where there was something that was designed and it was really, really hard to implement because MongoDB doesn't do certain things well. And it was, we could do it, but it was going to require a whole bunch of time, and I was going to have to do something terrible that I was not going to be proud of. So I have a few choices at that point. I can go to my non-technical stakeholder and be like, look, I can bring him the problem. I can say, because we made this technology decision, this certain thing that we were supposed to do is really hard and we can't do it. And that was my gut reaction, to go and bring that to him. But I took a step back and I was like, wait, what's going to happen if I do that is he's going to either hear that this guy doesn't want to do something that's hard, which is not the case. I love doing hard things. Or that we made a bad technology decision, which also wasn't the case. I still believe that in that particular instance, MongoDB was the right thing. It's trade-offs either way. This was a pretty minor one. So instead, I went to our designer. And because he writes Ruby, he understands this stuff. I can get him on the same page as me. And I explained that this thing's hard, and not hard in the challenging good way, but hard in the unicorns are going to die way. And I was like, can we change this UI a little bit so that it utilizes this other thing, and then it'll work a lot better for us? And he's like, that's not a problem. So he and I go together to the client and say, look, we're starting to implement this thing, and we realize that there's another way we can do it that's going to save a whole bunch of time, and so we'll be able to do this faster, and it's just as good, if not better, of an interaction. And he's like, that's awesome. So instead of going to him with this problem and him, ruining some of that trust and confidence in us, we came to him with this solution. He didn't even know there was a problem. He just sees that we're saving him time and money. We're looking out for his best interests and his client, and the project's best interests. So it's building that trust and confidence in us. Everything in consulting is about trust and confidence, owning the role, the role of the expert. So, what is a consultant, right? It's the person who does things that should not be this difficult. How many times have you implemented a jQuery slide animation and your stakeholders go bananas? It's amazing. That is the coolest thing ever, right? And it takes like 10 seconds to write, one method call in JavaScript. They don't understand the complexity. They don't understand the full nature of what we do. And it's our responsibility to deliver information to them that's consumable within the context of their understanding and the things that they care about. When it's your business stakeholder, you can put it in terms of timelines and budgets, and maybe some interaction, because that's what they care about. When it's your designer, all he cares about is how the front end interacts with the back end, if he even cares about that much. Can we do these things that he's designing? The project manager, right? What % complete are you? When's this thing going to be done? And if you abstract away all the technical side of things and make those decisions on their behalf, then if you make good decisions, that's going to build that trust and confidence. If you own the role of the expert, they're going to see that, your career is going to soar. I know if I had done that back when I was at a product shop, all of my projects would have gone better. And the better relationship you have with your product people means you're going to have better projects. You're going to get put on the better projects. And everyone's going to love you for it. That's all I've got. Thank you very much for coming. I'd love to hear any questions, comments, or feedback. If you don't catch me now or before the conference is over, please feel free to email me. Anybody?
How do you deal with more technical clients? Do you have to reveal more to them?
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, everyone works under Oh, I'm sorry. They asked if you're dealing with more technical clients, do you reveal more to them? Yes, absolutely. You have to really take into consideration who they are, what their background is, what their skill set is, and the things they care about. Like I said, I lead with as little information as possible, but I'm always ready to provide more. And in some cases, they do ask me to go into detail about things, and I'm happy to do that. I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm trying to not waste their time. I'm trying to make some decisions on their behalf so that we can move quickly. I don't want meetings to take too long, because that's not good for us or for them.
If I understand it right, you invite your customers or how do you call them, to your dating standards. So, but you pointed out that you actually don't want to be too technical with them.
Right.
How does this work out when you have to be technical at the dating standards with the client, even if you don't want to overdo it with them from a technical point of view?
You're saying if they're always asking you to go into technical detail?
No.
I'm sorry, I don't hear.
Like, you have to be technical at the data setups with your team, and the client is joining you. How does that work out if you don't want to be too detailed with them about it?
You probably need two different stand-ups. Like I said, we meet before the actual stand-up time and talk about that stuff internally before we get on the call with the actual stakeholder.
It's a little bit bothered by the balance there. You don't want to appear incompetent to your client, but sometimes it's real to have them, questions about something that was explained yesterday, and it's real for the answer to change.
It is, absolutely. That is a good question. He said it's real for answers to questions to change over time. And yeah, that's something you have to be cognizant of. We're an agile shop, so I make a lot of decisions on their behalf, and if they're not good, or if they change, then we'll change it later. A lot of times, most of the decisions we make are pretty small, if you think about it. And sometimes when it's something larger, yeah, you need to go and be like, look, we're about to get started on this thing, and it's pretty big. This is what we're going to do. And I want to get your buy-in on this before we get started.
Aside from just a intuitive kind of gut check kind of sense for things, how do you detect problems in the process and ways to solve them in a way that you ensure kind of a culture that persists across the organization?
You're saying when you're in an organization that just won't allow you to operate that way? How do you?
What kind of mechanisms can you put into place to try to detect problems and
Like what kind of problems?
so, for instance, if I'm in a stand-up and I detect that, like, okay, we're not presenting with unified front this time. That's great because I was there and I felt it, right? But if I wasn't present, or whatever other process we have, and I'm not present to just intuitively sense it, what kind of stuff do you put in place to detect those kind of things?
Yeah, that happens. He asked when maybe you're not there, maybe for whatever reason you can't present that unified front. Maybe you do get into it with your coworkers during the thing. That happens sometimes, and it's okay. You don't want it to be like the thing on stand-up that you're always doing it. So just one argument amongst yourselves is not going to destroy their trust in you. But every negative interaction you have like that kind of picks away at the trust and confidence. So it's important to educate your team members on it. You want to get their buy-in that, look, we're going to have these discussions beforehand. And if, say, the client does bring something up during stand-up and we have to answer it, most of the time if I can't just answer it for them, then we'll take it offline and be like, we'll get back to you a little bit later with the answer to that because we can't answer it right this second if it's not a clear answer. Does that make sense? Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I actually was wondering what your opinion is on explaining to a client when they ask, how soon can this be done? Like, I need this done ASAP. Can it be done in a week? Yes, it could be, but not the right way. And it's really hard. How do you explain that, or what's your approach to that?
I won't tell them it can be done the wrong way. It's going to take as long as it's going to take. Software development is hard and complex and time consuming. When we story card, we make them into small, very small chunks, so they can see, that this thing they're asking for has 10 pieces to it, so they can see that complexity right there. And even if you're not doing that kind of story carding, that might be a time when it's appropriate for you to kind of go into a little bit of detail about the things you're going to have to do, just so they understand that this is actually really complex. It's not something I can just knock out. Like I said, present them with the best solution. Don't even give them the option of the bad solution, because they'll choose it, and it's going to do way more damage down the road than just taking an extra couple days maybe and doing the right thing. Anybody else? No? All right. Thank you very much.